Where are you going, Master?
For a drink.
Sorry about the mess.
You will never find a more wretched hive of scum and villainy. We must be cautious.
It's great to have you, Freddie, on Rebel Force Radio.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, absolutely. Welcome to Star Wars. It must be a thrill to be playing the character of Kanan on Star Wars Rebels.
Yeah, man. It's for guys my age, even a little bit older. I mean, that's sort of the dream come true. Star Wars has been, ingrained in me and pretty much every single person I know. That when you get the chance to do something that epic. Yeah, man. I don't care if he's animated, if he's real, if he's just a figment of my imagination, and I'm going to wake up and it was all a lie. But right now, it's awesome.
Yeah, it's really great to have you on board. I'm a member of the original Star Wars generation, grew up in the 70s, grew up with the original trilogy. So I know exactly what you're talking about, how it's ingrained. I've heard you, and I've actually repeated this quote of yours a few times where you say, it's part of our DNA as kids who grew up in the 70s and 80s.
Yeah, you hear May the Force be with you as much as you hear, please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance when you grow up in that generation. Yeah. So it's definitely a DNA thing.
Yeah, no question about it, And your character Kanan is really the guy in Rebels who's the man in charge. He's the guy who's sort of pointing everyone in this direction of rebellion, and he has his roots as a Jedi. He's being called the Cowboy Jedi, and I was just wondering what do you think makes him a cowboy?
I think, let me answer the first part of your question first, or address the first part of your question first. As far as him being the leader, I think that's the perception. But if you see who's kind of pulling the strings, I think you see Hera is a stronger presence than just a pilot on the ship. So he definitely is the field commander. But you see when Hera tells him to do something up to this point in the show, I mean, he may complain, but he does it. So there's that old saying, the man may be the head, but the woman's the neck. You know what I mean? So it's sort of that same philosophy. As far as hit me with because that threw me off when I heard you say that. I just want to be clear. So hit me with the second part of the question again.
Well, no, you're absolutely right though, because we've made that observation ourselves that Hera is the quiet leader. She's the silent leader. She knows how to pull people's strings. She knows how to manipulate to get the situation results that she wants to get. And that's been very obvious in the few episodes we've already seen.
Yeah, and it'll become more so as it goes on. I didn't mean to get sidetracked there. Let me address your question. Just ask me what it was one more time.
Yeah, it was, specifically that moniker that has been applied to him, the Cowboy Jedi. What makes him a cowboy?
Yeah. Honestly, we're looking at a boy to some extent, but a boy whose master was taken away during Order 66. I always want to say Protocol 66. I don't know why. But during Order 66, his master is taken. His training was incomplete. And I think through that, think of it as sort of like a high school dropout. Juvenile delinquency sort of takes over, and he's forced to use his force in a way that's secret, and so far that he has to hide his lightsaber. So I would say equivalent cowboy to undisciplined, equivalent cowboy to roguish for a reason, as opposed to just, hey, he's cocky and brash, which he has that. I mean, he definitely has moments of arrogance when he's beating up stormtroopers. But I would say it's more of his sort of on-the-job training. Like Roy Jones Jr. was great because he was unorthodox. He didn't throw a jab the right way. He didn't throw a punch the right way. He didn't throw a hook the right way. He knew how. He just relied on his Jedi powers to outperform people. And if you're not familiar with him, he was pound for pound the best fighter in the world for a very long time. So he relied more on that than technique. And you see the Inquisitor sort of call Kanan out on this. He calls out the fact that I rely on my close quarters technique far too much. And this is all on-the-job training for Kanan. So his skills, you see the propensity for his power when he force lifts the Inquisitor, right? But that only happens when the stakes are at literally a 10. When it's just him versus the Inquisitor, I mean, I'm getting one-handed by this guy, and he's calling out my techniques almost before I do them. So, there's this sort of unorthodox rebelness to him that sort of, I think, really defines what the Cowboy Jedi is. If that wasn't too babbly, hopefully that makes sense.
No, hey, listen, we're all for babbling here about Star Wars on Rebel Force Radio, so you fit right in. And hey, man, mad props for making the comparison between Kanan and Roy Jones Jr. More than just being familiar with him, he's one of my all-time favorite fighters. And you mentioned he did have that label for the longest time when he fought as a super middleweight and a light heavyweight as being pound for pound the best fighter in the game. Do you consider Kanan at this particular point in the Star Wars chronology to be pound for pound the best Jedi out there?
I don't consider him to be pound for pound the best. I consider him more what Roy was when he began, which was when he got wins, when he knocked people out, when he beat people. It was by doing something that you're technically not supposed to do because it doesn't work. And because no one would expect you to do that, that's why it does. And that's how I would make him. I wouldn't say that Kanan's the best Jedi because he's not even, in my mind, a Jedi Knight yet. He's not even close to being a Jedi Master. So as far as on the power scale, he's down near the bottom, but it's his unpredictability that makes him successful in Season 1 on Rebels.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's hard to consider Kanan even a Jedi. He certainly didn't complete his training, and that's what makes him, I believe, reluctant to take Ezra under his wing and makes him a reluctant teacher because he really hasn't been shown the ropes completely himself yet. He's learning on the job.
Well, imagine, a young kid who grows up without a father who's 15 years old and his girlfriend says, "Oh, by the way, I'm pregnant." You know what I mean? I mean, that's what's being thrust on this guy. He's young emotionally, although he's in his late 20s physically. He certainly isn't prepared to be a master, let alone a teacher, let alone a father, and now he has to be all three at once. And if he's not, this kid's not going to go along for the ride. So you have to remember with Kanan, it's a fine line because Jedi aren't supposed to deceive. Jedi aren't supposed to lie. Jedi aren't supposed to be insecure. And so every time Kanan is suffering from this, there are consequences, which makes me completely okay with it. Because when you first hear Cowboy Jedi, at least when I first heard it, I didn't really know how they would pull that off because I don't see a Jedi being arrogant. I see that as more of a Sith quality almost, to like sort of stare at someone after you beat him and be like, "That's right, sucker." So it didn't feel Jedi-ish to me. And then when you see our scripts and how they're laid out and how when he isn't relying on what he would have been taught or what he has been taught, he fails. And that's such a great thing about Star Wars is they've always sort of kept that line as clear-cut as possible, and they punish their Jedi who cross it. And you have to hope that Kanan learns that lesson, and thus far he has.
What has Dave Filoni taught you about the character of Kanan, and what has he taught you about the Star Wars saga in general? I
mean, look, Dave literally would call me his Padawan, which I guess makes him my master, which is sick and twisted. He is my encyclopedia. He's my director. He's my friend. You know what I mean? I ask him a million questions about every script we get. I text with him back and forth. We talk. So as far as, what he's taught me about this world and this character, I mean, just about everything. Before each episode starts, we discuss every single aspect of the script. And you have to remember, we're all recording this almost like a radio show. It's very organic. We're all in there at the same time. We're doing the whole show in order. And you kind of get that great feeling in the show as you watch it. And Dave is the guiding force through that. And if we don't have that conversation beforehand, the world isn't sort of painted as beautifully as it needs to be. And he's such a sick artist, a multifaceted artist, that when he does break it down, you sort of know exactly where your character is at in the universe, in the Star Wars universal history, so to speak. And you know what they're going through emotionally. You know what they've dealt with. I can't say too many of the things he's told me specifically because they haven't been revealed yet, and that would wreck story for a lot of people. But as far as, what I've learned from him and this character, just about everything, other than the natural things from my own life experience that I bring to the character that I pitch to Dave, my philosophies on Jedi versus Sith, being samurai versus ninja, and for me, growing up, it was Star Wars and kung fu movies or samurai movies. and there was a series called Lone Wolf and Cub, which to me is the relationship between Kanan and Ezra. He puts this boy, he's a Ronin samurai, and he puts this boy on his back, and he never lets anyone behind him because no one's going to hurt this boy. He has nothing to fight for, but now he has this. And if you watch just if you saw it on the XD app, you've seen it. But if in the upcoming episode, you see what happens when Ezra is in danger, and you see just how strong Kanan can be. He just hasn't mastered that part of the Force. But like any Jedi, when the chips are down and that emotion comes out, you can see where they rate on your Force scale, however you want to judge that. So those are some of the things that I bring to it. You know, a kid not having a dad growing up and suddenly having the responsibility of children, I can relate to that. A samurai to a lone wolf type, Jedi Padawan story, I can relate to that. And so I bring those life experiences, but the rest I rely on Dave and Dave alone.
That's really interesting to hear how you bring in your real life experiences, especially growing up, into this character. It's amazing. You grew up a big comic book fan too. I don't know if many people know that. Who were your favorites, and what kind of elements of comic books do you bring into Star Wars?
As far as comic books go, those stories, the character suffers pretty much their entire lifetime. And they never have good lives. So they were stories about sacrifice. I was a big Wolverine guy because he reminded me of my Uncle Jim, who was a Vietnam veteran. They even looked the same. They even had weird hairy shoulders that were exactly the same. The only difference was one was Canadian and the other was from West Virginia. But, so to me, that sort of stoicness, that sort of I use this word again, but lone wolf mentality of, I'll do things on my own. I'll work with the team, but I don't need to. A lot of that is in Kanan, and you'll see that you have to remember, we are the rebels, so I'm not giving you a spoiler to say, well, who will they be a few episodes from now? Well, we're going to be the rebels. So, it's easy for me to do sort of a soldier who wants to remember what he's fighting for as opposed to what other people want him to fight for. That's easy for me to draw from comic books because that's just about every character that's ever been made, which I think is why they're so good. It's why I think they get made today, because Hollywood got away from characters suffering. It became like video games are now. Movies became God mode, where your hero has unlimited ammo. He can't be killed, and you can kill the boss without taking a single bullet. And when I grew up, video games were built for you to fail. It was the quarter generation, and you had to earn your victories. And so, we deal with things a lot differently than kids today. I still play games, and when I play multiplayer games, I know how old you are based on if you're crying and screaming because you can't kill me. Whereas if I get killed, I just figure out a way to get you, because that's what it took in my generation. So, I bring a lot of that lone wolf mentality to him because I just think it's appropriate. I think it fits his behavior. And I think when the chips get down, those are guys you can count on, guys that you see suffer, guys that you see get beat up and then stand back up again. I think probably the last great guy to do that was John McClane in the first Die Hard, where he just takes a beating barefoot with 100 old Twinkies and like 7 bullets, and it's not until the very end where he gets some success. Like, Star Wars makes you wait 3 movies before Darth Vader gets beat. 3, could you imagine Hollywood having the guts to stretch something like that out that long? They have to with Harry Potter, but that's the only other time. Yeah. So it takes courage to tell those types of stories. It takes courage to lay a storyline out. But you're dealing with the guys that did Clone Wars, so they have zero problem laying a story out and allowing you to sort of, the audience, to experience the show along with whatever character it is you're following. In this instance, it happens to be Ezra. So Ezra is the audience, right? As he discovers things, we discover things. Right. As I say, we, the collective, is the audience. As he learns about the Force, we learn about the Force. So, I'm babbling, but I think that answers your question.
It's really cool to consider that, the show is being told from the perspective of Ezra. And it's really fun to see the family dynamic come together among the crew on board the Ghost, with Zeb and Ezra being very much older brother and little brother. Hey, you brought up Wolverine. Does Wolverine remind you of Zeb at all?
I hadn't made that comparison because we treat him like a Wookiee so much that he reminds me of a Wookiee that can communicate better than Chewie. But I can definitely see the comparison now that you bring it up. Yeah, definitely. But you nailed it. I mean, it's big brother, little brother. It's, I hate you, but I'm the only one that's allowed to say that, and if anyone else does, I'm going to smash them into the dirt. And, you know, it's Spike and Tyke every once in a while. It's, hey, Spike, didn't we get him? Didn't we beat that stormtrooper up? Shut up. Smack. You know, it's that relationship, too. Tough guy and then wannabe tough guy. But I think as you watch Ezra develop, you're going to see more of a soldier-like camaraderie that he has more with Kanan than you see right now. But like with any good Star Wars story, Ezra has to earn it. It's not going to be episode 5 and, yeah, Ezra's the man. No, he's going to earn it, and it's going to be nice and subtle and drawn out so that in season 3, 4, 5, hopefully if we get to be there, people are still getting to discover things and learn more about these characters because they didn't get it all in the pilot.
Hey, you know, you talk about future episodes. What kind of vote of confidence for you as a cast member was it when you realized that Disney had renewed the show for season 2 before season 1 had even started?
Well, you know, for me, it's Star Wars. So, you know, if they wouldn't have, I would have felt like that would have been a mistake. That's not me being arrogant because I don't have anything to do with it. It's Star Wars. Nobody's bigger than that, not even Mickey Mouse. That's why they purchased it, because they want a piece of that. Every great movie since Star Wars was made is Star Wars. That was how you created a bad guy. That was how you created a good guy. So when movies get it right, there's always that sort of Luke Skywalker feel or Darth Vader feel. You want to be afraid of your bad guys, you know, to the point where they're so good at their craft that you root for them. So in my mind, it was they darn well better pick this show up. It's Star Wars. You can't just give them one season and take it away, especially if people are going to watch, and they're gonna watch, man. They just, if for no other reason, to see if this generation of Lucasfilms respects them as an audience, and if not, then they'll turn off. They'll say, no, I'm not watching that. Forget you. And it's like, you know, taking a chapter out of the Bible almost to them. But I think once they saw that, we really respect this universe, the people involved are the people that you're used to, people that you trust from Clone Wars. And I believe at this point people know the actors really are appreciative and respect these roles and treat them with great care. Everyone goes, you know, is there pressure? And most actors want to look cool, right? We go, no, there's no pressure at all. It's tremendous pressure. It's Star Wars. And when you get a speech about the Force, you're describing something that existed in mythology since the 70s. And so you need to treat that with respect and with great care because you're almost preaching philosophy. And to go back to the samurai thing, it is a philosophy. So I take it seriously. Definitely.
And you also bring up rooting for the bad guy, and Star Wars has always been populated with incredible bad guys. And next week on Star Wars Rebels, we finally get treated to the debut of the Inquisitor. Is the Inquisitor going to be the type of guy that we love to hate?
You know, in our first episode, I think the hardcore fans will love him regardless. But like with anything, you want to hear what he has to say, and that'll be sort of drawn out over a few episodes in the beginning, and then I think people will start, you know, we make bad guys that people actually love. So I think he'll become one of those. But in the very first episode, he shouldn't be, because people shouldn't want him to kill Ezra and I, or it'd be a quick show. So hopefully they're just afraid of him, and hopefully they find him as chilling as we did. I mean, Jason was in the room when we did that first episode together, and he just played it so cold and unfeeling and hyper focused. And I mean, if you have the XD app, you've already seen the episode because you have access to it. I don't, because I have DirecTV and they don't have a deal with them, I guess.
That's right, yeah.
So, you know, a lot of people have to wait till Monday to see it. But yeah, man, he's going to be great. They wouldn't have given him a toy if he wasn't going to be awesome. So, I don't, you know, we have a couple of characters that don't have toys yet. So he's going to be somebody that I think people fall in love with.
That's awesome. And, you know, you revealed yourself as a boxing fan, a Roy Jones Jr. fan. You're also a very well-known wrestling fan. You've actually done some work for Jim McMahon over there at the WWE. And do you find that your fandom of wrestling might come into play when you are voicing the character of Kanan. Is there any sort of influence that you pull from wrestling and apply it to Star Wars?
I wouldn't know where to pull from in that regard. My experience there was very different, and the characters there are sort of, larger than life characters, whereas Jedis are more subtle and stoic. So I don't know what I would pull from that. But, my godfather's Bob Wall, and for those who don't know who he is, Google him. He trained with Bruce Lee when Bruce came to America.
Wow.
So I didn't learn how to throw a football, man. I learned Jeet Kune Do. I learned judo from Gene LaBelle. He's the first guy to ever choke me out. Wow. I think I was 8 years old, and my mom had to hit him on the head with a magazine because I didn't know how to tap out yet. I learned jiu-jitsu from the Machados and from the Gracies, who I still train with today. I learned how to box from Johnny Tapia in Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Wow.
I didn't have a say in I wasn't allowed to do school sports because my godfather thought team sports were stupid. They taught you how to blame other people for your own problems, and individual sports taught you self-confidence and self-reliance. And in my case, it worked. I never had any issues saying no to things or caving to peer pressure, and people knew what kind of life I lived. And they respected that for the most part. And the guys that didn't, they only messed up once, and then they were pretty cool after we had our disagreements. So as far as that type of philosophy goes, to me that's very Jedi Knight. It's very Obi-Wan in hardcore Obi-Wan. So I bring a lot of that, but I wouldn't know. The WWE is so. It's such a different animal. It's such a different beast. It's, you got people in the crowd screaming because they know what you're going to say. It's almost like going to the Rocky Horror Picture Show and they're saying, a toast, and everyone throws bread at the screen. It's a very interactive environment, whereas Star Wars is sort of, you're in the spaceship and someone else is flying and you're just watching the stars streak by. You know what I mean? To me, they're night and day.
Well, Fred, I had no idea you had such an incredible background in martial arts. Don't mess with Freddie.
No, I'm a nice guy. Jiu-jitsu guys are nice guys. We don't mess with anybody.
And hey, the characters in Star Wars Rebels, all the characters on the show have such incredible chemistry. So that there's something cool going on behind the scenes. What's it like for all the actors when you guys gather in the recording studio, and who's the biggest cut up?
Well, the biggest cut up, they may say me, but it's Steve. They'll say Steve. Because Steve can make anything more adult and inappropriate than it needs to be, regardless of how the line is written. So as we get going and we hit the later hours, sometimes that'll come out. But you got to remember the way we record is unique. I almost said very unique, but I don't think something can be very unique if it's unique. But it's a unique experience because. Every video game I've done, I've only done 2, but they're the types of games they are. The cast is tremendous. It's 8 to 12 different characters, and I've never met any of these people. Like, you're in a booth by yourself. Usually, the director is in Canada where they're developing the game, and there's zero interaction, and it works. There's games where it's wonderful in, and there's games where you can kind of tell and it doesn't work. But our situation, like I said, it's literally like doing a radio show. We had. Wait, can I say who this was? I think, we've seen the trailer for it. Okay, so we had an actor who was playing a senator, and he was in there doing the live recording with it, not live recording, but doing the recording with us, and he said, this is so funny because when I was a young actor in the 70s in Philadelphia, they did a radio show of Star Wars. And he had like 2 lines that he had to do. And ever since he said that, literally I've compared what we do to doing a live radio show. I keep messing up and saying our live recordings as if we're matching the show you're watching as you're watching it. But it definitely has a very organic sort of Breakfast Club or theater-like feel, and you're working off other people. I can see Vanessa, I can see the expressions on her face. If she's mad at me, I encourage her to kind of look at me and give me those looks. And Taylor in the beginning, he's very respectful and very professional. And there are times where the Ezra character is not going to be that. And so while he's saying his lines, I'm looking at him and mouthing the words like, come on, come get me. And then, of course, by episode 2, he's like, oh, well, if I can go in on him, I'm going in. So I don't have to encourage him at all anymore. He's completely Ezra'd out the moment they say action. But yeah, he because of that, I think because of that environment, it gives that show that sort of special feeling that you mentioned earlier in your question.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, like I said, it comes across loud and clear on the screen. And so would you say Steve Blum is probably... I've heard you mention this before, that he has actually taught you a lot about working as a voice actor. What is the most important lesson he has taught you up to this point?
Outside the technical stuff that I won't bore you with, it's just a different type of commitment. When you're doing work on camera, if you don't commit to what this character's saying, it looks fake and people go, "Oh, that guy sucks." In voiceover work, you don't have all these extra tools that you have on film. I can't cross my arms and sort of slide my body away from you to let people know that I'm uncomfortable around this character. I don't get to do that. So you have to create things. Well, I thought you have to sort of create things in your mind, and I would try to visualize things. And in order to do that, I would, have to not even look at the script and have to just have it in my mind perfectly and create this world. And then I saw Steve just sort of go for it. And he just didn't care what his body looked like. He just literally would vomit energy. And everything sort of clicked and made sense. And I was up for this voice in a game from a company that I love the games they make because they're very character driven. It's called BioWare. And the game was Dragon Age Inquisition. And I booked the job, but I booked it with a different voice. It was just a lower register of what I'm doing now. And I spoke to him about, what I was wanting to do and what I was thinking of. And literally it just sort of came together from him giving me courage to kind of go for it. And so there's a show called the Mickey Mouse Clubhouse, which is far different than the one you and I saw when we were young.
Okay.
But they have a character named Thunder and Pete. And he has this voice that's like this. And he says, "Mickey the Mouse," and my daughter loves him. And then I thought of Winston Churchill, and a drunk Winston Churchill, which is pretty often. And I sort of combined those voices together, and instead of it being Thunder and Pete, all of a sudden he became the Iron Bull. And none of that would have happened if it wasn't for Steve Blum sort of helping me identify voices and figuring out how to just sort of pull it all together and make something that sounds ridiculous magic. And so for that, I owe him a lot. And I make sure he knows that, but he's far too humble to accept any praise, so he will mute the entire part of this interview.
Well, you know what? I think he deserves it. And you know what? You deserve all the success you've been having. I want to congratulate you on all the cool things you're bringing to the Star Wars universe. And before we let you go, I just want to ask you a little bit about growing up in that original Star Wars generation. You mentioned it. It's part of our DNA. Did you collect the action figures when you were a kid? Did you read the comics?
Yeah, I had the Darth Vader carrying case, and I had multiple figures stuffed in each slot until the cheap plastic snaps that they put on the side literally broke, and I would have to wrap a big rubber band around Darth's head in order for it not to fall open. So I definitely had a lot of the toys. I mean, we didn't have much cash when I was growing up, so I only had one ship, but I saved up for the Millennium Falcon. I had to wait 2 Christmases to get it, which sucked, but I still got it. So for the most part, we would make up our own games. I've told this story before, but my cousin and I snapped this thin little aluminum flagpole back and forth till it snapped. And he was Vader and I was Luke, and we, had our lightsaber fight, and I slid down a slide, and the flagpole hit the ground before I did, and it just took a huge chunk out of my chin. And so literally that scar is from Star Wars. But my favorite character ever, he wouldn't even go in the Vader box. Like he hung out on my dresser, was Boba Fett, because he had a jetpack and he could fly. And I would take paper clips, and my mom, she was sewing back then, and I would take all her thread. She had to stop. And I took the paperclip and I would wrap the fat part of it around his waist. I would bend it into an L, and the fat part I would wrap around his waist, and I would use the top part of the L and the top hook as the hook for the zip line. And I would literally tie thousands of thread lines all over my room, and some would be crashing into Army men, some to Star Wars guys, some to Transformers, whoever it was, but nobody could beat Boba Fett. It didn't matter. I didn't care what powers they had. I would always give him more. and I would literally slide him from the top corner of my room. I literally climbed dressers and drawers to get up there. I taped the thread everywhere. I tie it everywhere, and I'd let him just haul down this thread and take out like Optimus Prime and Megatron at the same time.
Yes.
And he was just my favorite toy. And my mom literally would walk in the room and be caught in like a Lord of the Rings like spider web and cuss me out and break everything and tell me to do homework or something. But, that was my childhood. So you can, you get if I'm excited to play a Jedi,
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It comes through loud and clear that you, sir, are a Star Wars fan, and we're so happy to have you contributing all your skills and talents to the Star Wars universe via Kanan on Star Wars Rebels. Yeah, for crying out loud, you got a scar on your chin that says it loud and says it proud that you, sir, are a Star Wars fan, and we love hearing we love hearing from the creative forces behind Star Wars who also share the fandom that we have for the franchise. And like I said, nothing is more permanent than a scar on your chin from a lightsaber duel that happened when you were a kid. So that's our public service message to our listeners this week. Even if the lightsaber is fake.
Good enough for Han Solo. It's good enough for me.
Right. You got the Solo scar. God bless you.
Exactly.
God bless you. And that even crosses over to Indiana Jones, too. So
there you go. I'll take it. I'll take a bullwhip all day.
Freddie Prinze Jr., you are the man. It was a pleasure to meet you. We're so happy to have you here on Rebel Force Radio, and we hope we get the chance to talk again very soon.
Nah, man, thanks for the kind words. I appreciate it, and we'll speak again.
All right, my friend. Take care.
All right, brother, you too.